In 2005, the Chicago White Sox steamrolled everyone in their path en route to a World Series victory, their first championship in 88 long years. Throughout the heroic home runs and dominant starting pitching performances, what often gets lost in translation about this '05 team is that the White Sox did it without their longtime franchise icon, Frank Thomas.
Frankie! There's a man. Whoa! Hey, Frank! Choke up on the bat a little.
Our people at Foot Locker are so into the game of baseball, of course they'd have the new Reebok statement.
Break's over. I'm right behind you.
To that point, the Big Hurt's 448 home runs were more than twice as many as any other player in White Sox history. He owned the Southside franchise records for runs batted in, extra base hits, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, you name it, his name was probably at the top of the list. Thomas even threw out the first pitch in the World Series opener and hoisted the trophy at the parade alongside an impassioned speech to the fans he had played in front of for years. From the looks of it, this sounds like a ceremonious and storybook ending to a Hall of Fame career. Thomas played for 15 wonderful years, and in the end, he got a World Series ring. But this fairy tale ending was instead derailed, not only by the fact that Frank Thomas missed most of 2004 and 2005 with various injuries, but because of his deteriorating relationship between himself and the people in charge over at the White Sox. The straining of this partnership had been building for years to this point. In 2000, during spring training, Frank Thomas and then White Sox manager Jerry Manuel got into a shouting match over Thomas's refusal to participate in running drills with the rest of the team. Mind you, Thomas was coming off surgeries on his right foot and ankle and was heeding advice from doctors to take things easy. But this isn't to say that Thomas wasn't at fault ever. In 2001, he had his own 6-day walkout as he sought a new contract, and his own agents decided to quit on him in the middle of this. In 2002, Thomas was benched after showing up late to a game in the middle of July, missing the team's pregame stretch routine. This was coinciding with both his decline in play and decline in health. Thomas was sidelined in 2004 with a partial stress fracture in his left foot, and after surgery to repair that foot in the offseason, Thomas ended up missing most of 2005 by breaking that same left foot. In November of that year, the White Sox bought out Thomas's contract for $3.5 million. The severance of ties was made ugly with the quotes that followed the White Sox decision, most notably by then general manager Kenny Williams, who said in an interview that Frank Thomas is an idiot, he's selfish, and that's why we don't miss him, and we've held it in for far too long. Thomas, obviously not appreciative of Williams' aggressive comments, was more disappointed with chairman Jerry Reinsdorf, who did not call him to tell him of his release. But even with that very ugly ending, at age 38, I don't think anyone would have been surprised if Frank Thomas decided to sail off in the sunset with a 15-year big league career, over 400 career home runs, and now a World Series ring. But that offseason, Frank Thomas found himself at the winter meetings. There, he met Billy Beane, famed general manager of the Oakland Athletics. The two clicked instantly upon meeting, and shortly after their introduction, a deal was struck, and for the first time in his long career, Frank Thomas would don a uniform that wasn't black and white. Thomas signed a one-year, $500,000 contract with Oakland for 2006 that could expand as far as $2.6 million with incentives. If Frank is healthy, he's been good against everybody. That if, though, is a pretty big if. Frank Thomas had played just 2 full seasons in the past 5 years to that point and hadn't done so since 2003. For the A's, it was a low-risk, high-reward situation. If Thomas got hurt again, they had internal options to substitute at DH and were only on the hook for the league minimum. If Thomas was healthy, they were gaining one of the best power hitters in league history. The early results on Frank Thomas's new venture were promising. He announced his presence in the green and gold by kicking off his season with a long home run off Randy Johnson on opening day. But it would be slow going throughout the early portion of the 2006 season. Thomas's nagging injuries had caused him to miss the majority of spring training, and over his first 34 games, he was hitting under 200 with an OPS under 700. Already a month and a half deep into the season, the Oakland A's were faced with tough decisions. How much longer could they wait around for the lumbering 38-year-old to recapture his form? A lack of production at the designated hitter spot was a death sentence for any American League team looking to contend with the powerhouses out east. Oakland needed every competitive edge they could get with their shoestring budget. Then, out of thin air, Thomas found his own remedy. His teammate and future manager of the Oakland A's, Mark Kotsay, recalls a specific day in 2006 where Thomas's season began to turn around. We used to use these awful balls for batting practice, baseballs that were blemished in some way, and I could vividly remember Frank Thomas taking every ball and throwing them into the stands. Thomas later walked into the equipment manager's office, demanding new baseballs be used for batting practice and slapping down a 5-figure check to ensure the job got done. Thomas homered that same night, and his 2006 season really started from there. Giving Major League Baseball players rundown balls to use in BP is like giving them blitz balls to use in BP. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Let's check this out for a sec.
Blitzball Battle 5. We got Lovias and Woogas.
My heart is with, obviously, the team in pink. I've had some success on the floor, but I feel like Woogas are the surprise team of this tournament.
Jimmy Norp, his teammate, telling me that he thinks Dan could be the best pitcher in this tournament.
I got to go with Lovias a little bit.
Okay.
Make sure you tune in later today for Game 3, Blitzball Battle 5.
The players in Blitzball Battle 5 are certainly going to be off their ass, and you should do the same with a fresh can of Mountain Dew, the sponsor of today's video. With bold flavors and a refreshing citrus kick, Mountain Dew will get you off your ass and have you feeling like you're on top of an actual mountain. For me, I like to kick back with those guys, have a Mountain Dew, and play some blitzball. Indoors or outdoors, as long as I have a Mountain Dew in hand, I'm going to be having a good time. The mountain is calling, and you should answer. Grab your friends, grab a refreshing Mountain Dew wherever beverages are sold, and do the do. And speaking of refreshing drinks, I'm pretty sure the Oakland A's could have used some of that in their clubhouse.
How come soda is $1 in the clubhouse?
I don't know.
As much as Frank Thomas needed the Oakland A's to ensure his career could continue, the organization needed Frank Thomas just as much, a proven winner and Hall of Fame talent, to slap some sense into the team. This BP event happened to coincide with an important road trip. The A's headed to Chicago for their first matchup with the White Sox in 2006. A return to his old stomping grounds was exactly what Thomas needed to awake from his slumber. During the first game of a doubleheader in May, Thomas went 3 for 5 with 2 home runs, doubling his home run total from the month of May in a single game. He finished the series with 4 hits and 4 walks, and then he reached base safely in 9 of his next 10 games to finish the month. Then he kicked off June by hitting safely in 10 of 11 games. His hot streak coincided with the team's hot streak as well. The A's entered play on June 3rd, 5 games under 500, 4.5 games back at the division lead. That's when Oakland rattled off 13 wins in 14 games, including a 10-game win streak, propelling themselves into first place in the American League West, a spot that they would hold for the remainder of the 2006 season. The Big Hurt was a massive contributor in that. In July and August, he posted an on-base percentage well over 400, with an OPS well over 900 as the steady power threat in the middle of their lineup. But in the home stretch of the season, Thomas saved his best performances for the final month. Frank Thomas clubbed an absurd 11 home runs with 35 runs batted in the month of September alone, nearly matching his totals from the prior 2 months combined. It took another Oakland A's player nearly 2 decades to match that RBI total in a single month, with Brent Rooker doing so in July of this year. Thomas finished the year with 39 home runs and an on-base plus slugging percentage 40% better than league average, both marks being his best in a season since 2003. Thomas became one of just 5 players in Major League history to be age 38 or older and hit that many home runs in a season. And if you want to up the ante, his 114 RBI are the 3rd most among hitters age 38 or older. You know the Unk still got it meme? That's basically Frank Thomas in 2006.
Excuse me, are you Frank Thomas?
Yes, I am.
I bet you get recognized a lot.
I was a pretty good ball player.
You were?
Oh, yeah.
Just when everyone thought his career had entered its twilight, Thomas put up one of the best veteran hitting seasons in Major League history, no hyperbole. He finished 4th in American League MVP voting for his efforts in an admittedly wide open field where he could have become the first everyday DH to win MVP. The A's ended up winning the American League West Division title with a week to go in the regular season, sending Frank Thomas to the postseason for just the 3rd time in his lengthy, prestigious career. As great as Oakland's run to the postseason was, they still had their own demons to conquer in the month of October. Despite 4 straight playoff berths from 2000 to 2003, Oakland was unable to advance past the first round in any of those appearances. Worse yet, getting to Game 5 in every single scenario and losing the do-or-die game every year. The organization hadn't won a postseason series since 1990 to that point, which was a 16-year drought. Frank Thomas was facing his own drought as well. Though he owned a World Series ring, he wasn't really a part of the 2005 White Sox. Outside of that, he had made the playoffs with them just 2 other times in his long career, losing in the first round both times. Oakland was facing a titan in that year's division series in the Minnesota Twins, led by American League Cy Young winner Johan Santana, who got the ball in the first game of the series on Minnesota's home turf. Thomas stepped up to the plate in a playoff game for the first time in 6 years in the second inning, and in a 3-1 count, he lived up to his nickname. Thomas took the southpaw phenom way deep to left field to give Oakland an early lead, a lead that they would hold through the 8th inning thanks to a masterful performance by Barry Zito. In a 1-run contest late in the game, Thomas stepped up once again, this time against Jesse Horsey Crane. He would hit another home run to extend Oakland's lead, and his pair of bombs was key to a Game 1 victory on the road for the A's. After he set the tone with this win, the team rode the wave of momentum. Oakland won again in enemy territory the next day, then wrapped up a dominant series sweep back at the Coliseum, avenging the 2002 Moneyball team that fell to those same Twins 4 years prior. For the first time in over a decade, the Oakland A's were championship series bound, and in the near 2 decades since 2006, they have yet to make it this deep in a playoff run since. Facing off against the Detroit Tigers, the A's bats were stymied in a Game 1 loss at home. In Game 2, despite leading early, they entered the bottom of the 9th down 3 runs. Detroit's closer, Todd Jones, quickly struck out the first 2 batters, leaving Oakland with 2 outs and nobody on in an 8-5 game, staring down the barrel of a road trip to Detroit down 2-0 in the series. But then, Jason Kendall hit a single. Mark Kotsay followed with a single of his own. Milton Bradley legged out an infield hit afterward, and suddenly the bases were loaded. The go-ahead run was at the plate, and who else than Frank Thomas. On the 3rd pitch of his at-bat, Thomas looked to square up a fastball and etch his name into Oakland's franchise history forever. But even in this fairy tale season of all fairy tale seasons, sometimes we just don't get the storybook ending that we're expecting. Thomas caught one off the end of his bat, flicking a lazy fly ball to center field. Catch made by Curtis Granderson, game over, and a win for the Tigers. I mean, did you guys read the title of the video? That almost is there for a reason. Unfortunately for Oakland, this matchup with Detroit would be a series to forget, and that especially applies to Frank Thomas. After his red-hot ALDS, Thomas went completely ice cold against the Tigers pitching staff. He went 0 for 13 in the series as a whole, and worse yet, he had numerous opportunities to make a difference. 8 of his outs were made with men on base, as Thomas went 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position and left a dozen men on base total. In the aftermath of this deflating championship series loss, Thomas did depart for the Blue Jays on a 2-year deal. But his performance in the final go of the season is not what's remembered about his tenure in Oakland. The Big Hurt is remembered fondly for his time in the Golden Green and still credits his induction to the Hall of Fame as a product of his fantastic year with Oakland. In an interview upon his induction, Thomas remarked that, "The year that really got me into the Hall of Fame was 2006. I was counted out by a lot of people, and for me to go there and have another MVP type season, it was an incredible feeling. I first got there and I was in a mental funk after being with Chicago for so long. I was rejuvenated by a young cast of characters, and it was a different world, and I really think that got me into the Hall of Fame. It showed I could adapt and adapt quickly." You may be surprised by him saying this, being that it was just 1 year, but he makes some really good points here. Without his rejuvenation in Oakland, he wouldn't have reached the 500 homer club because his career probably would have ended in 2005, and he also wouldn't have hit other benchmarks like the 70 WAR club and the 1500 RBI club. Now, these things might seem trivial and not really matter in the grand scheme, but these kind of minute, small differences stand up really big when writers are filling out their ballots, comparing players endlessly and trying to find an edge for someone compared to someone else. So for the Big Hurt, his career renaissance was nearly perfect, if not for a couple missed opportunities during the ride. But that's baseball. It always finds a way to provide the magic or rip your heart out, always when you least suspect it. But that'll do it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time.